There is no film franchise like James Bond. For over 60 years, dozens of films have formed the archetype for the action spy movie genre. From unforgettable characters and performances to extraordinary stunts and obscenely bespoke gadgets. With it being home to so many iconic moments in film history, the Bond franchise will likely remain peerless for as long as movies are being made. But arguably, the most iconic and recognizable aspect of James Bond is its genre-defining music. Is there a more iconic melody in the history of cinema than the seminal James Bond theme? This timeless piece of music was composed by Monty Norman as the main theme for Dr. No in 1962. And for the princely sum of £250, it was arranged by the great John Barry, a man that, upon completing this, would end up defining the sound of the spy film for time immemorial. John ended up scoring 11 of the 25 Bond movies. And with the combined contributions of all those responsible for this music, the sheer wealth of musical brilliance that exists within the James Bond pantheon is quite simply beyond compare. When other composers came on to score a Bond movie, they brought their own flair, from George Martin in Live and Let Die, to Michael Kamen's work for License to Kill. And David Arnold's beautiful work on many of the movies since Tomorrow Never Dies. These scores, while varied, remained very faithful to John Barry's iconic sound, chopping and changing it, reimagining it, and expressing it in their own way. That is, except for one movie. For Pierce Brosnan's first outing as Bond, the producers courageously decided that a new sound was needed to bring these films into the 90s. Supposedly they had really liked the music in two of Luc Besson's movies, Léon the Professional and La Femme Nikita, and decided to ask the relatively unknown composer that had created that music to come on board, Monsieur Éric Serra. And it was this decision that led to GoldenEye being the Bond movie that sounds like no other.
Point taken.
GoldenEye is an outstanding James Bond film, and it is in the conversation for being my favourite Bond movie of all time. Directed by Martin Campbell, who, incidentally, directed what might be my other favourite Bond movie of all time. He also directed another top-tier highlight of the 90s in The Mask of Zorro, along with some other films not quite so well revered. GoldenEye really straddles the darker tones of License to Kill, and I believe the original treatment for GoldenEye was written with Timothy Dalton in mind, and contrasts them with the more campy or larger-than-life, spectacle-driven vibes that would dominate the rest of Brosnan's tenure as James Bond. There are so many legendary characters in GoldenEye, with the great Sean Bean's portrayal of Alec Trevelyan easily being up there as one of the greatest Bond villains of all time. And how the story ties both Trevelyan and Bond together still moves me. I love the stories that happen because of Bond, rather than simply to him. Judi Dench's iconic turn as M began here, and it ended up being so powerful that she survived the reboot. Famke Janssen portrays the sadist Xenia Zagayevna Onatop, and I also cannot help but mention Alan Cumming, who played Boris Grishenko. He had no right creating a character and giving a performance this iconic and memorable, which also happens to include one of the best deaths of any character in the history of James Bond.
I am invincible!
And of course, there is the music. When I started doing some additional reading and research around this soundtrack, I really was quite surprised to discover how widespread the dislike for it really is. 90% of the criticism I have encountered seems to come down to the fact that GoldenEye just doesn't sound like James Bond. And whilst this is, of course, true in the sense that the sounds of John Barry, the bold brass, those seductive strings are almost nowhere to be found, for me, this just is not a good enough reason to mark down the music in GoldenEye. As a general principle, I cannot ever hate on those that opt for bold, creative risk, regardless of whether it pans out. Those that have been bold should be respected if we want to foster more creativity in the media that we all love so much. But even with that being said, I freaking love the music in GoldenEye. From the very first instant the film begins, we know we're in for something very, very different. The punchy synth brass paired with the percussion, the darker, more atmospheric tones and the technological industrial sounds, all play while crucially supporting that definitive ascending and descending fifth that is so crucial to the Bond harmony. And this all offers a strong and powerful contrast with virtually every single film that preceded it and all that succeeded it. Contrary to what some may believe, Éric Serra had been a massive Bond fan since he was a child, and he deeply respected the legacy that he was building on. Ultimately, it was his love and knowledge of the material paired with let's keep it real, a fearless courage to just be himself that led to this controversial, but I would argue, awesome soundtrack. Rather than using the traditional musical weapons associated with Bond, such as the bright brass, epic minor major 7 chord, or a dirty, dirty trumpet, Serra deploys silence and restraint as his most powerful tools. From the moment the film begins proper, there is a delightful peacefulness, a patience, and then we get a little taste of the weird but wonderful signature Serra percussion. From the triangle to the sleigh bells to the iconic metallic hit that we hear in a lot of Luc Besson soundtracks, such as Leon, The Fifth Element. And for those of you that are interested, this sound is from the EMU Proteus 2000 synthesizer, and the patch is called Infinite One. Now there are more small hints and touches of music before Bond knocks out the Russian guard in the lavatory, and the GoldenEye overture begins. Again, there are some bizarre and weird choices at play here, with the Bond riff, rather than being played on a guitar, is being played on timpani. But what can I say? It works. And already we can hear and we can feel the subversive, musical and emotional world that is being created with this film. And as it continues, there are countless bizarre and strange cues, beginning with the legendary street race between Bond in the Aston Martin DB5 and Xenia in the Ferrari 355. In any other Bond movie, the music over this section would have been luscious and deep. Whereas here, it's calmer, it's understated. Two words that are pretty much never associated with Bond, especially the music. And this restraint also manifests itself in the deliciously confident absence of music as well.
Boris!
What?
Thanks. Our satellite is knocked out. So are 2 of the Americans.
I'm Defense Minister Dmitry Mishkin. So, by what means shall we execute you, Commander Bond?
What, no small talk?
When you experience silence in a movie, it really conjures the feeling that those making it are patient and confident, as they are allowing their film to breathe and not cramming every nook and cranny of it with music or sound. And this does help enhance the power of music when it does hit. This calm, confident restraint continues to manifest itself all the way through GoldenEye, really honing in on the unique emotional space that GoldenEye occupies in the Bond universe. That is, until we get to the tank chase, one of the highlights of the film. Now, Éric did create some music for this section, but nobody seemed to be satisfied with it. Martin Campbell, the director, said that it was basically impossible to get the music to punch through in the mix because the register of the instruments conflicted with the sound of the tank. Thus, 1 week before the film was due to be released, John Altman was brought in to compose, arrange, and record some new music for the tank chase. Now, whilst many people consider this to be the musical peak of the film, I don't quite feel that way. While the sequence is outstanding, and John's music is fantastic, the classic Barry-esque sound ultimately feels very disconnected from the emotional world that Serra had created until this point. And whilst I do like Éric's original composition for the sequence, I concur with those that feel it does leave something to be desired. But rather than this clean break from the rest of the music in the film, I really feel that there could have at least been some effort to bring in or mix in some of Serra's percussion or electronic or industrial sounds. And that way it really would have felt like a peak of the GoldenEye soundtrack rather than a totally different piece from a totally different composer slotted in a few days before the film's release. And as the film continues, we're treated to more really awesome musical cues. And Serra is doing a great job of building the tension as we make our way to the final satellite sequence, or, as us Nintendo 64 veterans know it as, Cradle. And for me, this really is the musical and emotional peak of the movie. Watching this, how can you not love this cue? How can this not get your juices flowing? And the ending serves as a perfect culmination of tension, darkness, and what a dark ending it is. Proper dark. So to the people that say this doesn't sound like a James Bond movie, I just can't agree with you. It doesn't sound like a James Bond movie composed by John Barry, rather, it sounds like a James Bond movie with music composed by Éric Serra. It sounds like GoldenEye. And so far as I'm concerned, that is freaking awesome. Goddamn, what a movie. Now, if you cannot fathom somebody being this wrong about something this important, I would love for you to tell me why I'm wrong in the comments below. Likewise, please feel free to share what is your favorite James Bond music from this insanely amazing catalogue of greatness. Otherwise, I want to thank you very, very much for watching this video all the way to the end. Incredible. I really appreciate you. If you did enjoy it, please consider clicking like. And if you'd like to see more videos like this in the future about James Bond and other cool, awesome stuff, please consider clicking subscribe. Otherwise, I want to say thank you once more, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye.